One evening, Guy de Maupassant, the Kleber had dropped anchor in the roadstead, and I gazed with admiration at the magnificent Bay of Béjaïa spread out before us. The high mountains, covered in Kabyle forests, the yellow sand of the shore appearing from a distance like a scattering of gold, the sun streaming in fiery torrents over the white houses of the little town. My heart leapt with joy upon sensing in the sultry African breeze the scent of the desert, the breath of that great and mysterious continent into which the northern man had only just begun to penetrate. For 3 months I had roamed the edge of this unexplored world, so full of secrets, wandering along the shores of a fabled land, the homeland of the ostrich, the camel, the gazelle, the hippopotamus, the gorilla, the elephant, and the Negro. I had seen an Arab, whirling by on his horse like a streaming, vanishing banner. At night, I had slept in his dark tent, among the encampment of these white birds of the desert. I was intoxicated by the light, the fantasy, the vastness. Now, after this final journey, I was obliged to return to France, to see Paris again, that city of aimless chatter, petty worries, and countless handshakes. With what regret did I bid farewell to this world that I had grown to love, though I had only glimpsed it. Our ship was soon surrounded by a whole flotilla of small boats. I jumped into one, where a young black boy sat at the oars, and shortly we moored at the quay near the Saracen Gate. Its gray ruin at the entrance to the Kabyle town resembled a shield from an ancient coat of arms. I stood on the pier with my suitcase, looking at the roadstead where our enormous vessel lay at anchor, enthralled by the incomparable coastline with its semicircle of mountains washed by blue waves, as beautiful as the shores of Ajaccio and Porto and Corsica, and surpassing in its beauty the Bay of Naples. Suddenly, a heavy hand fell upon my shoulder. Turning around, I saw beside me a tall man with a long beard, wearing a straw hat and a white flannel suit, staring intently at me with blue eyes. "If I'm not mistaken, you were once my schoolmate," he said. "Quite possible. What is your surname?" "Tremulen." "Why, of course. You even sat next to me in class." "Yes, old chap, and I recognized you immediately." And he rubbed his long beard against my cheeks. He seemed so pleased, so happy about this encounter, that, yielding to an impulse of friendly selfishness, I warmly shook both hands of my old school comrade, feeling incredibly pleased to see him myself. For 4 years, Tremulen had been my most intimate, my closest school friend, one of those we forget so quickly after leaving the college. In those days, he was a lanky, thin youth with an excessively large, round head, too heavy for his neck, causing it to loll from side to side, its weight pressing down on the narrow chest of the tall, long-legged schoolboy. Precociously developed, gifted with remarkable abilities, rare mental agility, and an innate intuition for literature, Tremulen always received the top prizes. At the college, everyone was convinced he was destined for fame. As a poet, of course, for he wrote verses and was inexhaustible in concocting all sorts of intricate and sentimental fantasies. His father, the owner of a pharmacy in the Pantheon Quarter, was known as a man of modest means. After the baccalaureate exam, we lost sight of each other. "What are you doing here?" I exclaimed. He replied with a smile. "I'm a colonist." "Is that so?" "Planting things and harvesting them." "What exactly?" "Grapes, which I make into wine." "Successfully?" "Yes, very." "All the better, old chap. Were you headed to a hotel?" "Well, yes, of course. You're coming to my place." but no arguments. And he said to the young black boy, who was watching our every move, "To my house, Ollie." Ollie replied, "Yes, sir." And, hoisting my suitcase onto his shoulders, he set off at a run, raising dust with his black heels. Tremulen took me by the arm and led me away. He immediately began questioning me about my travels, my impressions, and, seeing my enthusiasm, seemed to like me all the more. He lived in an old Moorish house with an interior courtyard, no windows facing the street, crowned with a spacious gallery that offered a view of the terraces of neighboring houses, the bay, the forests, the mountains, and the sea. I could not restrain an exclamation. How wonderful is here! In this house, one feels the Orient with one's entire soul. Good God, what a lucky fellow you are to live here. The nights you must spend on this terrace. You sleep up here, don't you? Yes, in the summer I do. We'll sit up there this evening. Do you like fishing? What kind? Fishing with fire. Of course. I adore it. Excellent. After supper, that's what we'll do, and when we return, we'll have sherbet on the rooftop. After I had bathed, my friend suggested we explore the charming Kabyle town, a veritable cascade of white houses tumbling down to the sea. When darkness fell, we returned home and, after partaking of an exquisite dinner, went back down to the quay. Now, only the lights of the town and the stars were visible, huge, bright, sparkling stars of the African sky. A boat was waiting for us in the port. No sooner had we seated ourselves than a man, whose face I could not discern, began to row, while my friend busied himself preparing the fire so he could light it quickly later. He said to me, "You know, I handle the trident myself. There's no one more skilled than me here. Congratulations." We rounded the breakwater and found ourselves in a small cove with numerous tall rocks, whose reflections seemed like towers erected in the water. And suddenly I noticed the sea was phosphorescent. The oars, dipping into the water with slow, measured movements, ignited a strange, shimmering light within it, which, fading, trailed long behind us. Leaning over the gunwale, I watched this bright, transparent wake, shattering under the oars, this ineffable luminescence of the sea, these cold sparks flaring up with emotion and dying out as soon as the water grew calm. The three of us moved through the darkness along this glittering path. To where? I could not see my companions. I saw nothing but the luminous trail and the sparkling spray cast up by the oars. It was hot, unbearably hot. The gloom felt as if heated in a furnace, and this mysterious journey with two invisible men in a silent boat stirred a vague anxiety within me. In the distance, thin Arab dogs with reddish fur, pointed muzzles, and gleaming eyes were barking, as they always do at night in this vast land that stretches along the ocean shore and deep into the deserts where tribes roam. Their calls were answered by foxes, jackals, and hyenas, while from somewhere not far off, likely from an Atlas gorge, came the roar of a solitary lion. Suddenly, the oarsman froze. Where were we? I heard a faint rustle, a match flared, and a hand appeared, just a single hand, carrying the trembling little flame towards an iron grate filled with kindling, hanging from the prow like a floating brazier. Awaiting a new thrilling spectacle, I began to watch the small flame intently, its touch making the dry heather laid on top crackle. And then, through the slumbering, sultry, and sweltering night, a bright, tall flame burst forth, and under the dome of the looming darkness, it illuminated the boat and both my companions. The old, thin sailor with a wrinkled face and a gray head wrapped in a scarf, and Tremulen with his golden beard. "Forward," he shouted. The sailor took up the oars again, and we moved within a ring of fire beneath the dark vault that followed us. Tremulen tirelessly fed more wood into the bright, crackling blaze. I leaned over the gunwale once more and saw the seabed. As we advanced, an astonishing aquatic kingdom opened up beneath us a few fathoms down, where water gives life to plants and animals, just as the air does to all living things in the heavens above. In the bright glare of the fire, which penetrated to the stony bottom, we glided over strange growths of brown, yellow, pink, and green algae. The extraordinarily clear, fluid, almost invisible pain of water separating us from them lent them something fantastical, transporting one into a dream world inspired by the ocean depths. Beneath the bright water, more sensed than truly seen, this strange vegetation evoked unease, a kind of doubt in its reality, and it seemed phantom-like, like nature in dreams. At times, these hair-like strands would float up to the surface and sway gently from our boat's slow progress. Among them, slender, silvery fish darted away, sliding past, flashing for an instant before vanishing. Others, not yet awakened from sleep, hung amidst the algae and swayed, shimmering, fragile, elusive. Now and then, a crab scuttled by, seeking refuge in some hole, while in a gentle eddy, the gelatinous body of a bluish, transparent, almost invisible jellyfish flickered, resembling an azure flower, a true flower of the sea. And suddenly, the bottom disappeared, as if plunging deep, deep down into a glassy, thickened haze. Then, only large rocks and dark seaweed were faintly visible, weakly lit by our fire. Tremulen, leaning forward, stood in the prow with a long, trident harpoon, peering keenly at the rocks, the weeds, the shifting seabed with the burning gaze of a beast on the hunt. Suddenly, with a swift and deft motion, he plunged the split tip of his weapon into the water, and hurled it like an arrow with such speed that he impaled a large, elusive fish mid-flight. I saw only Tremulen's gesture, but I heard his triumphant cry, and when he raised the harpoon, I saw in the firelight a writhing creature pierced by the iron prongs. It was a sea eel. My friend examined it, then, holding it up over the fire to show me, flung it onto the bottom of the boat. The sea serpent, wounded in several places, slid and crawled past my feet in search of shelter, and, finding a puddle of salt water between the planks, coiled up there, contorted, dying. With astonishing dexterity, lightning speed, and extraordinary accuracy, Tremulen kept plucking bizarre denizens from the salty depths. I watched as they flew over the fire one after another, writhing in their death throes, silvery sea-wolves, dark moray eels mottled with bloody spots, spiny wolffish, and cuttlefish, those strange creatures that spew forth ink, turning the water around our boat pitch black for minutes at a time. All the while, I fancied I could hear bird calls in the darkness, and I kept lifting my head, trying to discern where this sound was coming from, a sound that was at times short, at others drawn out and sharp, a hissing that seemed now to approach, now to recede. It sounded incessantly from all directions, and it seemed as though a cloud of winged creatures hovered above us, undoubtedly drawn by our fire. At times, this hissing, deceiving the ear, seemed to emanate from the water itself. "What is that hissing?" I asked, embers falling into the water. Indeed, the fire was sprinkling the sea with a whole rain of smoldering twigs. They fell, either still burning out or merely glowing, and were extinguished with a strange, faint, heart-rending moan, resembling now a chirp, now the short call of a migratory bird. Bubbles of resin buzzed like bumblebees or passing bullets, and, upon sinking into the water, were suddenly silenced. It created an impression of voices, an indescribable, helpless murmur of life lost somewhere nearby in the darkness surrounding us. Suddenly, Tremulen cried out, "Ah, the vile creature!" He hurled the harpoon, and when he raised it, I saw its prongs enveloped by a large shred of red flesh stuck to the wood, which twitched and stirred, now coiling, now uncoiling long, flexible, powerful tentacles around the shaft, studded with suckers. It was an octopus. Tremulen brought his catch close to me, and I saw the monster's huge eyes fixed upon me, bulging, dulled, terrible eyes that seemed to protrude from lumpy sacs. Believing itself free, the octopus slowly extended one of its tentacles, aiming its white suckers straight at me. Their tips were thinner than thread, and no sooner had this fierce tentacle hooked onto the bench than another immediately rose and began to unfurl. In this flexible, muscular body, in this living, blood-sucking creature, reddish and flat, one felt an irresistible strength. Tremulen opened his knife, and with a swift movement plunged it between the creature's eyes. A sigh was heard, a noise of escaping air, and the octopus ceased moving. It was not yet dead, for this nervous body clings tenaciously to life, but its strength was broken, its pump ruptured. It could no longer drink blood, suck out crabs, and empty their shells. Tremulen, as if playing with the agonizing creature, began to peel its limp tentacles from the gunwale, and, suddenly seized by an inexplicable fury, exclaimed, "Just you wait, I'll warm your little feet." He lifted the octopus and began to pass the tips of its tentacles over the red-hot grate of the blazing fire. They sizzled, contorted, turned red, and began to shorten in the flames. At the sight of this terrible animal's torment, I myself felt a pain that shot through me to the very tips of my fingers. "Stop it! Don't do that!" I cried. He replied calmly, "It's nothing. He hasn't yet gotten what he deserves." And Tremulen flung the half-dead, mutilated octopus onto the bottom of the boat. It crawled between my feet until it reached a puddle of salt water and coiled up there, breathing its last among the dead fish. The fishing continued for a long time still, until all the firewood was completely burnt out. When there was nothing left to sustain the fire, Tremulen threw the entire brazier into the water, and the night, which had hung over its bright flame, descended and enveloped us once more in thick gloom. The old man began to row again, slowly and steadily. Where was the port? Where was the land? Where was the entrance to the bay? And where the open sea? I could make nothing out. The octopus still stirred near my feet, and I felt a pain under my fingernails, as if they too had been burned. Suddenly I saw lights. We were entering the port. "Do you want to sleep?" my friend asked me. "No, not at all." "Then let's talk on my rooftop." "Gladly." No sooner had we ascended to the terrace than I immediately saw the crescent moon emerging from behind the mountains. From time to time, a gust of hot wind would sweep by, laden with faint, barely perceptible scents, and it seemed as though, having flown over the gardens and settlements of all the sun-scorched countries, it had carried away their fragrances with it. Around us, on the flat roofs of the white houses cascading down to the sea, dark human figures were visible, some sleeping, others lost in dreams beneath the stars. They were entire families, wrapped in long woolen garments, resting in the nocturnal silence after the day's heat. And suddenly, it seemed to me that the soul of the Orient had taken possession of me, the poetic and legendary soul of ingenuous peoples who think in such vivid and imaginative ways. Visions from the Bible and the 1001 Nights seized hold of me. I heard prophets proclaiming miracles. I saw princesses in silk trousers emerging onto the terraces of palaces, silver censers where incense burned, and the rising smoke taking the shapes of jinns. I said to Tremulen, "You are fortunate to live here." He replied, "Chance brought me here." Chance? Yes, chance and misfortune. You are unhappy, very unhappy. He stood before me, wrapped in his burnous, and in his voice I felt such pain that a shiver ran through my body. After a brief silence, he continued, "I could tell you of my sorrow. Perhaps it would ease my burden to speak of it. Tell me, you wish it?" "Yes." "Very well. Do you remember what I was like at the college? A kind of poet, raised in a pharmacy. I dreamed of becoming a writer, and, after passing my baccalaureate, I tried my hand, but I failed. I published a volume of verse, then a novel. Neither sold. I wrote a play. No theater would stage it. It was then that I fell in love. I shall not elaborate on my passion. Next to my father's pharmacy lived a tailor. He had a daughter. I fell in love with her. She was a cultivated girl who had earned a diploma from the École Supérieure, lively and impulsive, which harmonized perfectly with her appearance. One would have taken her for about 15, though she was already 22. Utterly petite, with delicate features, lines, and tones, she resembled an elegant watercolor. Her nose, mouth, blue eyes, golden hair, smile, figure, hands. It seemed everything was made for a display window, not for life in the open air. Yet, for all that, she was very agile, supple, and remarkably active. I was deeply in love. I remember 2 or 3 walks with her in the Luxembourg Gardens, near the Medici fountain. They will forever remain the finest hours of my life. You are familiar, are you not, with that state of amorous madness, when all one's thoughts are concentrated on the object of adoration. One becomes as if possessed, thinking incessantly of but one woman, a man for whom no one else in the world exists besides her. We were soon engaged. I shared my plans for the future with her, but she did not approve of them. She had no faith that I could become a poet, a novelist, a playwright, and she believed that a businessman, if successful, could be perfectly happy. Renouncing the idea of composing books, I found it necessary to turn to selling them, and I acquired a general bookstore in Marseilles, whose owner had just died. I lived happily for 3 years. We transformed our shop into a kind of literary salon, where all the educated people of the city came to chat. They visited us as one goes to a club, exchanging opinions about books, about poets, but chiefly about politics. My wife, who managed the book sales, enjoyed great renown in town. As for me, while they chattered below, I worked in my study on the 2nd floor, which connected to the shop by a spiral staircase. I heard the voices, the laughter, the arguments, and, at times, ceasing to write, I would listen to them. I had secretly begun composing a novel, but I was not destined to finish it. The most frequent visitors were Monsieur Montina, a rentier, a tall man, very handsome, a true southern Adonis with black hair and oily eyes. Monsieur Barba, a schoolmaster, 2 businessmen, Monsieur Fossil and Monsieur Labarègue. In general, the Marquis de Flèche, the most influential person in the district, leader of the local royalists, an old man of 66. Business was good. I was happy, very happy. And then one day, having gone out on business at 3 o'clock, as I was walking along the Rue Saint-Ferréol, I suddenly saw a woman emerging from a gateway, so similar in figure to my wife that I would have immediately said to myself, "It is she." If, an hour earlier, before I left the shop, She had not complained of a headache. The woman walked quickly ahead of me, without turning around, and I, surprised and troubled, involuntarily followed her. I said to myself, "No, it is not she. It cannot be, for she has a migraine. And what would she be doing in that house?" Wishing to verify completely, I quickened my pace to catch up with her. Whether she felt my presence, guessed, or recognized my gait, I cannot say, but she suddenly turned around. It was my wife. Seeing me, she flushed deeply and, stopping, said with a smile, "Ah, it's you." My heart constricted. "Yes. So you did go out? And your migraine?" I felt better. I went out on an errand. "Where to?" "To Laco Casades on the Rue Cassinel, to place an order for pencils." She looked me straight in the eyes. The color had drained from her face. Now she had turned slightly pale. Her bright, clear eyes, oh, those eyes of women, seemed so truthful, but I felt, vaguely and painfully, that they were lying. I stood before her, more agitated, more confused, more shaken than she was herself, not daring to suspect anything, yet utterly convinced that she was lying. Why? This I did not know. I merely said to her, "You did well to go out, since you felt better." "Yes, much better." "Are you going home?" "Why, of course." I left her and went on alone. What precisely had happened? Looking at her, I had felt subconsciously that she was lying, but now I could no longer believe it. And on my way back for dinner, I was already reproaching myself for having doubted her sincerity, even for a minute. Have you ever been jealous? Yes or no? Well, no matter. The first drop of jealousy had fallen upon my heart, and these drops are fiery. I wasn't thinking of anything definite. I wasn't supposing anything. I only knew that she had lied. Think of it. Every evening, after the customers and clerks had left and we were alone, whether walking along the embankment in fine weather or sitting in my study during bad, I had concealed nothing from her. I had opened my soul to her without reserve, because I loved her. She was part of my life, the greater part of it, all my joy. In her little hand she held my poor, captive heart, so trusting and devoted. In the first days, those days of doubt and despair, before suspicions intensify and become certain, I felt crushed, numb, as if some sickness had nested within me. I was constantly chilled, truly chilled. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. Why had she lied? What was she doing in that house? I went there, trying to find something out, but I found nothing. The upholsterer living on the first floor gave me information about all the tenants, but there was nothing that could put me on a trail. On the second floor lived a midwife. On the third, a dressmaker and a manicurist. On the top floor, 2 carters with their families. Why then had she lied? She could have simply said she had visited the dressmaker or the manicurist. Oh, how I wanted to question them myself. But I did not do it, fearing they would tell her, and she would learn of my suspicions. But the fact remained. She had entered that house and concealed it from me. Some mystery lay hidden here. At times I tried to convince myself that she had had commendable motives. Perhaps she was secretly engaged in charity, making some inquiries, and then I would begin to reproach myself for my suspicions. Does not every one of us have the right to our own little, innocent secrets, as if to a second, hidden life, for which we are accountable to no one? Is a man, merely because he has taken a young girl as his companion, entitled to demand that she account to him for her every action, her every thought? Does the word marriage mean a renunciation of all independence, of all freedom? Could it be that she had simply gone to the dressmaker without telling me, or was helping the Carter's family? Could it be that this visit, innocent in itself, would have provoked from me not a reprimand, but some remark? She knew all my weaknesses, of which I myself was unaware, and perhaps she feared not reproaches, but unnecessary talk. She had very beautiful hands, and it occurred to me that she was secretly getting a manicure in that suspicious house, but didn't want to admit it, afraid of seeming extravagant. In everything she maintained strict order. She was thrifty, prudent, attended to 1,000 details, like any calculating and experienced housewife. A confession that she was spending money, however little, out of coquetry, or so she might have thought, could have diminished her in my eyes. For there is so much petty calculation and innate cunning in the female soul. But all these arguments brought me no peace. I was jealous. Suspicions tormented, exhausted, tore me apart. I did not yet suspect anything definite, but I was already suspecting in general. I carried within me this torment, this mad anguish, a thought still hidden behind a kind of veil, but I did not dare to lift it, fearing to discover something terrible behind it. A lover. Could she have a lover? Think. It seemed incredible, impossible, and yet Montina's face stood persistently before my eyes. I imagined this tall, handsome man with his glossy head of hair looking at her with a smile, and I repeated to myself, "It is he." I even constructed in my imagination the entire history of their liaison. They had read some novel together. They had discussed amorous adventures together, found a resemblance to themselves and the heroes, and had proven this analogy in practice. I began to spy on them, becoming a victim of the most loathsome torture a man can endure. I bought myself shoes with rubber soles to creep noiselessly about the house, and my whole life was reduced to running up and down the spiral staircase, hoping to catch them unawares. Sometimes I even went down the stairs on my hands, head first, trying to glimpse what they were doing. Then, having ascertained that the clerk was with them, I would, with incredible effort, backing up, climb up again. It was not a life, but pure torment. I could not think of anything, nor work, nor attend to business. If I managed to walk 100 paces from the house, I would already be saying to myself, "He is there," and would return. He wouldn't be there, and I would leave again. But no sooner had I gone than the thought, "But now he has come," would drive me home again. This repeated itself day after day. At night it became even more dreadful, for I felt her presence here, beside me, in the bed. Was she asleep, or only pretending to be asleep? Was she truly asleep? Of course not. And this too was a lie. I lay motionless on my back, suffocated, tormented, burning with the heat of her body. Oh, what a vile and overwhelming desire seized me, to rise, take a hammer, approach her with a candle, and with a single blow split open her skull to peer inside. I knew I would find there only a pulp of brain and blood. I would learn nothing. It is impossible to know. And her gaze, the moment she looked at me, I was overcome with fury. You look at her, and she gazes back with those transparent, clear, and deceitful eyes. And you can never guess what thoughts lurk behind them. How I longed to plunge a needle into them, to pierce those deceptive mirrors. Oh, how well I now understand the Inquisition. I would have clamped her wrists in iron manacles. Speak. Confess. You won't. Just you wait. I would have slowly tightened my grip on her throat. Speak. Confess. You won't. And I would have squeezed until she began to gasp, to choke, to die. How I would have burned her fingers in the fire. Oh, with what delight I would have done it. Speak, then speak. You won't. I would have held them on the red-hot coals until the tips were charred black. Then she would have spoken for me. Mark my words. She would have spoken. Tremulen stood before me, his fists clenched, shouting. And the shadows on the neighboring rooftops rose, awakened, listened, disturbed in their rest. And I, agitated, seized by profound sympathy, saw that little woman so clearly before me in the darkness, as if I had long known this fair-haired, cunning, devious creature. I saw her selling books, talking to men excited by her childish appearance, and I saw on her pretty, doll-like head the cunning little thoughts and mad, high-flown dreams, the musky fantasies of perfumed shopgirls infatuated with every hero of adventure novels. I, just like him, stalked her. She inspired me with disgust, with hatred. I myself was ready to burn her fingers to wrest a confession from her. And he continued, now in a calmer tone, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I've never spoken of it to anyone. Truth be told, I haven't seen anyone these past 2 years, and I haven't spoken to anyone about anything. But it had festered in my heart, as if a filthy sediment had fermented there. Now I've laid bare everything that was on my soul. So much the worse for you. So here it is. I was mistaken. It was not what I had thought, but far more terrible than anything one could imagine. I employed the method one usually resorts to in such cases. I pretended to leave on business. In my absence, my wife always lunched out. I won't tell you how I bribed a waiter to catch her in the act. It was agreed that he would open the door of their private room, and at the appointed hour, I appeared with the firm intention of killing them. The day before, I had pictured the scene to myself so vividly, as if it had already happened. I enter. A table laden with bottles, glasses, cutlery separates her from Montina. They are so stunned at the sight of me that they freeze in place. Without a word, I strike the man with the lead knob of the cane I had brought for the purpose. He expires instantly and falls headlong onto the table. Then I turn to her. I hesitate a few seconds while she, comprehending everything, wrings her hands in mortal terror. Oh, I was prepared for everything, strong, unshakable. I felt a joy, an intoxicating joy. I imagined her desperate look at the sight of the cane raised over her, her outstretched hands, the shriek torn from her breast, her deathly pale, contorted face, and I consider myself avenged in advance. No, I would not kill her with the first blow. I seem bloodthirsty to you, do I not? But you do not know this agony. To think that the woman you love, your wife or your mistress, gives herself to another, belongs to him just as she does to you, kisses his lips as she kisses yours. What a dreadful, loathsome feeling. He who has once endured this torture is capable of anything. Oh, I am surprised there are so few murders on this account. For everyone who has experienced betrayal longs to become a murderer, rejoices in the desired death. Left alone at home, or finding himself on a deserted street, in anticipation of satisfied vengeance, he makes an advance with his hands that movement with which he will strangle or deal the fatal blow. I went to that restaurant. I asked, "Are they there?" The waiter I had bribed answered, "Yes, monsieur." He led me upstairs and, pointing to a door, said, "In here." I gripped my cane as if my fingers were made of iron. I entered. The moment was well chosen. They were kissing. But it was not Montina. It was General de Flesh, the old general of 66. I had been so prepared for the other that I was completely disconcerted. And then, I myself don't know what came over me. Or perhaps I do. Had it been the other, I would have been convulsed with rage. But, finding her with this pot-bellied old man with his sagging jowls, I nearly choked with disgust. She, my little one, who looked like a 15-year-old girl, was giving herself, belonging to this fat man, this near paralytic, merely because he was a marquis, a general, a friend and representative of deposed kings. Though, truth be told, I myself no longer knew what I felt or thought. My hand refused to strike down this old man. What shame! The desire to kill my wife had died within me. but I could have slain all women capable of such a thing. I was no longer jealous. I was appalled, as if I had beheld something monstrous. Let them say what they will about men, but they are never so vile as women. If you meet a man who sells himself in such a manner, he is pointed at with scorn. The husband or lover of an old woman is despised more than a thief. We too, my friend, are not without sin. But they, venal creatures, foul of soul, are ready to give themselves to the first comer, old or young, from the basest of motives, for it is their profession, their calling, their trade. They are eternal, unconscious, and serene prostitutes, bartering their bodies without the slightest disgust, as love's merchandise, for gold, to some old lecher, or out of vanity, to a lustful monarch, famous and loathsome in his old age. Like an ancient prophet, he declaimed in an angry voice beneath the starry sky, lashing out with the fury of one possessed against the celebrated shame of all the concubines of aged monarchs, the socially sanctioned shame of virgins who wed old men, the universally tolerated shame of young wives who smilingly accept the caresses of senescence. He summoned them from oblivion, listed them by name, and I saw them all, from the beginning of the world. Emerging from the darkness of that oriental night, they rose before me, lovely maidens with base souls, indifferent as animals to the male's age, shamefully yielding to his senile lust. I saw before me those handmaidens of the patriarchs, celebrated in the Bible: Hagar, Ruth, the daughters of Lot, the dark-skinned Abishag, the Shunammite virgin, whose embraces warmed the failing David. All those young, succulent, fair-skinned patricians and plebeians, unresponsive females of their master, submissive, blinded, or purchased slaves. I asked, "What did you do?" He replied simply, "I left. That is why I am here." And we sat for a long time side by side in silence, each immersed in his own thoughts. That evening left an indelible memory upon my soul. Everything I had seen, felt, heard, and surmised, the fishing, even that octopus, and this soul-stirring confession amidst the white phantoms on the neighboring roofs, all merged into a single, profoundly moving impression. There are encounters. There are inexplicable conjunctions of events, unremarkable in themselves, in which life's innermost essence is felt by us far more acutely than in our daily existence. Ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. Share your impressions and thoughts in the comments. I would be very pleased to chat with you.